There is a beautiful introduction that has been written. I had thought initially for about 5 minutes. And then those of us who work on the commons and who are engaging with communities and with government institutions face a sort of dilemma that I would call trying to reconcile two very different kind of institutional cultures. The commons, as I frequently point out to my other colleagues, emerged in a political and moral economy that is not modern. It is pre-colonial, it is pre-modern. It is often tied up with values, norms, which are derivative of a very different world. You achieved sustainable outcomes, ecologically sustainable outcomes, but those outcomes were often moored in relationships of certain kinds of inequality. So you could have graduated sanctions, you could have unequal access to resources, which were institutionally acceptable in different contexts. And the results were often ecologically sustainable. Now the thing is, today we are working in a very different moral economy. We are working we bring with us a certain ideas of egalitarianism, certain ideas of how you may not distinguish between different members of communities. And our contemporary politics, at least within our Indian constitutional framework as we have it so far, is premised on very different kinds of value systems. However, the institutions that are the means by which we try and achieve those ends are often bureaucratic. They are often tied up in very different kinds of, mechanisms of governance. They are not rooted in communities. So our big challenge, actually, as people who are academics, as people who work with communities, who work on commons, is to find a middle path, find a path in which we can retain some of the strengths of ensuring sustainable outcomes over longer term, but not at the cost of perpetuating social inequalities. That is, I think, the big dilemma that we are, as workers and researchers in this field. The idea of stewardship has, in the last 4 or 5 years, emerged as an important, it has provided a kind of vocabulary to introduce how community practices contribute to sustainable outcomes and in measurable ways. The idea of stewardship is not new. It has, you may be surprised, but it has its origins in theology. And from there it has emerged into modern discourse. The idea of stewardship in some ways contrasts with the mechanisms of command and control which state systems are premised on. So stewardship normally takes the form of informality. It happens without an explicit attempt at caregiving. It happens in everyday forms. And we do not even see it because it is so deeply integrated into life, everyday activities, that it is almost invisibilized. One of the important things that researchers have done is to bring out these aspects of stewarding into research. In this I see a huge similarity in which ecofeminist researchers also started talking about the way women's labor was often embedded in cultures of practice, which were rarely visible, but once we started seeing them, we realized that without those forms of labor, even production would not take place. So in that sense, stewardship is important. And we have the presentations, in my view, are moving between these two narratives. So I think I've spoken enough by way of an introduction. I will request my young colleague, Nayakana Veerasha, is it that pronouncing it correctly? Yeah. Who is a faculty member at the Symbiosis Law School, Pune. He will be talking on rights-based legislations and land alienation in the 5th scheduled area, revisiting the role of the state. So clearly, he will be engaging in one dimension of, I'm sure not exclusively, but predominantly one dimension of this dialectic that we are going to try and talk about today. Please, I request you.
Thank you, Jay, for your insightful introduction. And very good morning to one and all here. This is Veerasha, and I am working as an assistant professor. And I teach political science to the students of law at Symbiosis Law School, Pune. I would like to begin my presentation. As you can see, it's titled as Rights-Based Legislations and Land Alienation in 5th Scheduled Areas. Why there is a need for the revisiting the role of state in our country. So that's the topic of my presentation. Let me inform that when I say the rights-based legislations, here I am referring the 5th schedule of the Constitution, and more specifically the 5th section of the 5th schedule of the Constitution, which gives specific administrative role to the Office of Government in preventing the land in scheduled areas. So that's the first rights-based legislation, which is a constitutional provision, 5th schedule of the Constitution. And the second rights-based legislation is the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. And the third rights-based legislation is the Panchayat's Extension to Scheduled Areas Act of 1996. And the fourth legislation, that is the rights-based legislation, is the very sorry for that. So the fourth rights-based legislation is the Forest Rights Act of 2006. So these are the four rights-based legislations which we have, which are having a provisions which are clear in its nature that any transfer of land in scheduled areas has to be governed by these legislations. And most critically, the Office of Governors, we have 10 states in the 5th schedule: Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Odisha, and Telangana. So these are the 10 states. Of course, Telangana is the new joinee in that category. So we have these 10 states where the 5th schedule of the Constitution has to be in practice. So the Office of Governor in these states has a specific administrative roles as per the 5th schedule of the Constitution. So And how far the office of governor, because there is one role which is not, of course, not explicitly mentioned in the fifth schedule of the Constitution, but as a practice, each year the office of governor has to make a report to the President of India on the state of affairs in the scheduled areas, and this is an annual exercise. So, as part of my PhD work, when I looked at these reports, because the Center for Policy Research of New Delhi has published these reports a few years back. So when I looked at those reports, how far the decisions of the Tribes Advisory Council, because Tribes Advisory Council is one of the decision-making forum which is as part of the fifth schedule of the Constitution, and how far the resolutions or the decisions made in the Tribes Advisory Council has taken it forward finally to implement at the ground. That's the question. So unfortunately, the office of the governors and the reports, the annual reports which were sent to the President of India, except the Jharkhand and the Maharashtra, except these two states, and to some extent the Andhra Pradesh, that is the undivided Andhra Pradesh, barring these three states, none of the other states has not even referred cursorily the aspect of the land allocation in their reports. So the question that needs to be asked in this backdrop is that whether the specific administrative role that is given to the office of governors, how far it has been effective. So from the data, it has not been, the data says that the office of governors has failed in this particular context. In order to highlight, there is an issue of land allocation. If we look at this particular table, of course the Constitution of India has come into force in 1950. Of course we didn't have the Forest Conservation Act till 1980. So when we look at the diversion of the forest land, in spite of having the fifth schedule of the Constitution, there has been a diversion of the forest land to the non-forestry uses. So, from the 3 decades, that is the 1950 to 1980 itself, the data clearly indicates that the fifth schedule of the Constitution, and more critically, the office of governor, which is accorded a special administrative responsibility to prevent the land allocation, which has not happened in these 30 years. And these are the figures not by any estimations of the civic society. These are the data which I have drawn from the replies given in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha by the respective ministers, cabinet. So, in the first 3 decades itself, the diversion of the forest land has been continuously taking place at a rate of 0.15 million hectares annually. So then comes the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. So that's the fifth schedule of the Constitution, how the office of governors were failed to check or to prevent the land alienation, which is a specific responsibility in the fifth schedule of the Constitution. Sir, some question.
Or at the end?
It would be better at the end.
Because it's related.
It is okay, fine, go ahead.
I wonder what is the relationship with this, what you're saying, to Indian Forest Act of 1927? Like, there was an act before FCA as well, right? So
Yeah.
how alienation was happening within those acts?
Yeah, Indian Forest.
Any relationship with that schedule?
No, here my paper has looked the analysis in the post-independent period.
Oh, okay.
Of course, I have not related to the pre-independent period. Of course, there is a relationship. There is no doubt that. In fact, when we talk about the alienation, In fact, it's the 200 years. It's not just post-independent, I would say. But in my paper, I am trying to focus it on the post-independent period. What the Republic state has, whether it has able to check the alienation of land. That's my focus.
But the Republic kind of was leaning on to the British laws, right? Even though it was enacted in 1927,
Yeah.
post-independence, we kind of followed those forest laws.
Of course. Of
How
course.
is that, like, something maybe, to think about, or you may include or something like that?
No, that's a very good point. But here my focus is on, see, that's the critique we have. But the drafting committee chairperson, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, has clearly said and answered the critique that, even though the constitution is largely a Government of India Act 1935 and other constitutions across the world, but it took almost 3 years to frame the constitution as per the needs of our country. So that's the, I'm not saying that, but still the lineages of the colonial rulers and the laws and some of the imprints are still intact. There cannot be no denying fact about that. But my focus is not on that. My focus is on, as an independent state, as we enacted ourselves the constitution, we gave ourselves to the constitution, how far we are able to take it forward the vision of the constitution frames. So that's the focus. So in that context, when we look at the functioning of the 5th schedule of the constitution, and also sixth schedule, because we have also 6th schedule, which is exclusively to the northeastern states. So these two states, why there has to be focus on these two schedules, which are very exclusive to the welfare of the Adivasis. Because in these two schedules, the office of governors has a specific role. And let me ask this query: have you ever come across a notification in a local paper or any national newspaper saying that a notification from the office of governor, we are inviting the public opinion because there is a so and so law passed by the state assembly or the parliament, but as the governor of the scheduled area, I am seeking the public opinion whether this law has any implications on the welfare or the Adivasis rights in the scheduled area. This is how it has to be done. But either during my PhD work or even now also, I have not come across a single notification from any office of the government. And as part of my PhD work, I have personally requested and personally wrote to the office of governors to discuss some of these. But unfortunately, I know I may not get the reply. But that's the attempt has been made. But here the point is that the specific regulations and the specific provisions which are made to prevent the land alienation has failed to check the alienation of land, even even before the rights-based legislation specific, that is Forest Conservation Act, PESA Act, and the Forest Rights Act. So the working of 5th schedule of the Constitution is one of the causative factors for the alienation of land. And it is not that we don't know alienation is happening in not just the 5th schedule, across the country for that matter. But why I am referring the 5th and 6th schedule? Because we have a specific regulations, specific provisions as part of the Constitution, not as a statute or not as a state legislature. So that's the ground we have the land alienation, how it has been taking place. Now comes the Forest Conservation Act. And what is the impact of the Forest Conservation Act? So if we look at the extent of the diversion of forest land to the non-forest use, by number we can say that there has been a considerable impact. So where 0.15 million per annum the forest lands got diverted during 1950 to 1980, whereas it has come down during 1980 to 2004 to 0.023 million hectares. But the story doesn't end here. It doesn't infer that the decrease in terms of the diversion of forest land is not directly proportional or not only because of the forest conservation. There is no direct causal relationship between the impact of Forest Conservation Act and the reduction of diversion of forest land during 1980 to 2004. Now, this is the overall forest land diversion from across the country and the 5th schedule areas. So more than 3 lakh hectares of the forest land has been diverted between 2008-9 to 2022 and 20. And this is the data, again I am referring to the parliament debates and the Lok Sabha debates. All the data are the government data. These are not any estimations. This is exclusively the data which was reported, discussed in the parliament. So, when we look at this, 2008-9 to 2022-2022. So, out of more than 3 lakh hectares of forest land diversion, nearly 1,80,000 hectares of the forest land got diverted among the 5th schedule. Which means that, to say it as an authentically, 58.56 of the forest land of the 5th schedule got diverted for the non-forest use. This is in spite of having the legislations, not just the 5th schedule, which is the foundational, but this diversion took place in spite of having the legislations, that is Forest Conservation Act of 1980, PESA Act of 1996 and the Forest Rights Act of 2006. Next. Now, this is how the 10 states of the 5th schedule and the extent of the forest land diversion that took place between 2008-9 to 2022 and 2022. When we look at the 10 states, Madhya Pradesh is the highest in terms of diverting the forest land. That is with the 23%. Next comes the Odisha, and then followed by Telangana, then Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand. So, Odisha, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand. These are the 3 states where the forest land has been diverted for the, not just for the developmental initiatives, say for example, the construction of road, the construction of hospitals, the construction of schools, which are basic necessities of the human. But when we look at the average reduction in terms of the land holdings among the 5th scheduled states, this is somewhat the new data is yet to emerge, but this one which I felt still has some relevance. When we look at the average reduction in terms of the land holdings among the 5th schedule, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and the Andhra Pradesh. These are the 3 states where the average land size in terms of holdings, number of holdings of the average land holdings has been drastically come down.
Sorry, do you mean forest lands or just one here?
Pardon?
This land holding, do you mean forest lands?
Yes. So that's why I'm making it as a very explicit. These are all,
It's not clear.
the forest land.
It wasn't clear. You said individual land holding.
The individual land holdings. This is as a
Forest.
state, forest.
Forest, okay.
Now, here Jharkhand, as per this analysis, Jharkhand does not show the reduction in terms of the land size. But however, this I found that the data is missing here because we have the separate state of Jharkhand in 2000, but after the formation of the states, that is Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Uttarakhand. In fact, though I could not get the data, is there any impact on the after the new creation of the states? See, in 1950, okay, we have emerged as an independent nation and we have enacted the constitution. But after the creation of new states, is there any impact on the alienation of land? Whether the state has able to function as per the provisions of the constitution to check the alienation of land in the schedule. This is the average reduction in the size of land holdings. We can see clearly among the fifth schedule, the reduction is more when compared to the all India average. Now, the question is that I have done the analysis by using the Marxian framework of the concept of alienation, where the alienation takes place in the four distinct forms. First being the product itself. Here, the product I am saying it as a forest is one of the product where the alienation is happening away from the product. See, we are sitting here in the chairs and classrooms, but to construct these kind of buildings, it is the first owner or the ownership is that the person who went into the forest and took out the wood to make the furniture for it. So that's the product alienation which I am referring. And next is the process, that is the production process. That is the production process, the second form of alienation. And then the third is, once the production takes place, the alienation happens even within the coworkers. I am not able to interact. I can only focus upon making this chair or the furniture. So that's the third form of alienation. And the fourth form of alienation is the species alienation. So I may not have my social life, I may not have the family life. So that's the fourth distinct human alienation as a species. So these are the four distinct forms of alienation that takes place, that is happening with state as a facilitator. I'll come to that. So this is the nature of forest land diversion. But what is the purpose? What is the purpose? This graph I have directly taken from the Parivesh, which has a separate website. You can all look at it. It's publicly available. If we look at the nature of forest land diversion, 20%, 11 and 29. That is the industrial products. That means 20 plus 11 and 29, 31, 60. 60% of the forest land has been diverted to the industrial products. This is excluding the coal mine.
Yes, only you need to
Yes.
sum up quickly because there's
Yes, sir.
please,
Yes.
1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah. So, for the want of time, what are the causative factors? There are two important causative factors. The project of neoliberalism has emerged as a new political project. And here, the relationship between the state and citizen has been reduced to the consumer and subject, where the rights of the citizens has been subsumed in this new political project called as neoliberalism. That's one first causative. And the second causative factor is the capitalistic mode of development happens not in the precise way that by oppressing the rights of the citizens, but it operates in a very systematic way, which I am quoting, the exclusion through inclusion. So that's how it operates, the capitalistic mode of framework. So, to conclude my presentation, why I have named my topic of presentation of revisiting the role of state in India. So when I am referring the state, I am referring the three important organs of the state: legislature, executive, judiciary, and also civil society. So the revisiting must happen on these four important components of the state. So on the first legislature part, the definition of Gram Sabha given in PESA Act differs or the contradicts or to an extent as a dissonance the definition given in the forest rights. So that the legal dissonance has to be addressed by the legislature. Number two, the dialect, the language among these legislations has to be simplified. It has to be in the local languages. So that's the two important revisiting part. The legislature organ of the state has to be done. Now comes to the executive part.
Sir, I have to stop you. It's not fair on the others.
Sir, I am winding up.
No, you have been winding up for quite some time now. I think in 30 seconds, please finish.
Sure. Sir.
Yeah.
So executive has to revisit the role of state in terms of more interdepartmental coordination. That's the executive part. And the judiciary has to be more sensitive enough to understand the historical context within which the 5th and 6th schedule has been originated and incorporated in the Constitution of India. And lastly, the civil society, of course, the awareness generation about the rights has been happening, but now the state has been more on a hard hand. The strong voices of the civil society has to be coming more. With that, I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
I think we've had some questions in between, but I believe there are some questions I'm sure we want to ask. But I think I would like to have the second speaker come in, and then we can have. May I request Mr. Sarangi Sanjeev, Chief Operating Officer, Indian Gramin Services, to come. He will be speaking on restoring commons, reclaiming culture, community stewardship of the Narmada riparian landscapes. Sanjeev.
Thank you so much. And I think I am the odd man out in this panel because all are from the academicians and I am the practitioner. But as Professor said, he works with community, he works with commons to generate co-benefits. So I am just taking you to the ground. Some of our experiments on the ground. So I'll just share some of the learnings. So I represent Indian Gramin Services. So we are working with the rural livelihoods across several parts of the country. And this presentation will be focusing on the lifeline of the central India, that is the Narmada River, where we actually experimented with a pilot that the restoring the riparian areas through community stewardships. So why the commons are matters? So basically, when we say the forest commons or riparian commons or the wetland commons, so as the earlier speaker said that the conversion from the forest to non-forest land. So definitely this is the need of the hour because 1.5 billion, it's a thick country, human population, the growing need is definitely there, and with the limited resources. So we need a balancing act. We cannot say this is wrong, this is right, but we need a balancing act. So where we actually, our work actually falls around. Though the riparian areas is a severe challenging situation in the Narmada River because of the anthropogenic pressure which is actually increasing day by day, every day. People's engagement, people's interactions, people's dependency on the river is actually comprehensively high. So, but the soil erosion happens, the river landscape is actually changing year after year. So we did the pilot in the midstream of the Narmada River, that is in the Narmadapuram district of Madhya Pradesh. Because of the ecological stability, the commons actually contributing a lot to reduce the different kind of negative impact both on the ecology as well as the community, depending upon. So the riparian crisis is around the ecology, around the cultural drift, and also the emerging threats is the land use pattern has been changed. People are actually continuously encroaching the riparian areas through agriculture, and also the illegal sand mining happens in the river. There are several challenges happens, and definitely that is the urgent need for the commons governance around the landscape. So where we actually intervene, so we are not a research organization, we are not a mechanical organization, but we are working with human-driven development, where the social goods are taken care of, how the social capital will play a role to conserve and preserve the riparian commons. So we did this program 7 years back as a pilot with the support from the Nature Conservancy and currently working with the Hari Bharat Fund. So where the assisted natural regeneration, the ANR of the riparian forest has been taken care, wetland rehabilitation and the catchment area is also taken care, and the soil erosion control and sustainable agriculture through plantation and also nature positive agricultural practices has been integrated in our program. And the impact so far, 300 plus hectare degraded land has been restored with native species, and strong collective ownership emerging over the period. The communities, the local stakeholders actually comes together as a collective force to address the situation, and definitely it has set a foundation for the green livelihoods for the future. So the project is in some numbers. So more than 323 hectares, 25 kilometers stretch across Narmada River, more than 118,000 native species. So where the community's role comes to the place. The community are the best persons, knows about their landscape, knows about the requirement of the ecology and also the practices. So they have suggested the list of plants which actually goes around those landscape. Decision that we did, a detailed study, and also we brought together the academia, for example, Barkatullah University team actually collaborated with us. Actually, we did a detailed mapping across the Narmada riparian areas, mapping of the tree species which are actually exist and which is having actually provide security to the riparian areas. So more than 39 villages, 10,000 plus households we are working with, and we have developed a community cadre, those who call as restoration champions. The community cadre, the youths of those areas, we build them as a sustainable framework for human capital. Once we withdraw from the program, the restoration champions will take it forward. So they have been trained, capacitated, and also acquired with these tools, techniques. They actually inspired the neighborhood communities. That is one institutional framework. Second, we actually established the Harit Narmada Samiti. It's the community institutions in every villages. So they are caring for their landscape restoration, they participate actively and in the whole journey of building the restoration around the Narmada river. And at the same time, we also develop a riparian restoration guide, which is in Hindi. Madhya Pradesh is a Hindi state. So we develop that guide. That guide will help the local communities, so help the local cadres across the different agencies. For example, the state rural livelihood mission, they have the Jivika Sathi, Kushi Sathi, and Pasu Sathi. So also the community champions. So that is the guidelines for the steps and step processes to be followed in the restoration. So the key learning basically, when you see this stewardship, and Narmada river actually very much embedded with the local culture. The dependent community, what I can say, they shape Narmada river as a mother. Because it's a living entity. I think Uttarakhand is the only state, the first state, so they have declared river as a living entity. So that belief comes from the practices, and it's years after years, the people dependent upon the river. So culturally, they are actually engaged with the Narmada river. But over the period, their cultural engagement is also somewhere damaging the ecosystems. The rituals that are happening, use of plastics, polythenes, littering around the river, is the so-called nomenclature of the cultural engagement has been changed. That has to be rebuilt. And the partnership with the local stakeholders, we strongly believe that unless the local stakeholders are engaged, any interventions outside will not ensure the sustainability. So in that way, we actually rebuild the relationship with the local panchayat, PRA systems. PRA systems at the Gram Panchayat level, block level, as well as district level, so that they will engage and create an ecosystem of partnerships through administrative support, because the riparian areas is having multi-stakeholders custodian. For example, the revenue department, irrigation department, the watershed department, there are several agencies are actually have to play their role. Third, actually we also incorporate both woody as well as non-woody species, because inside riverbed we also experimented some of the non-woody plantations, so that have the strong biological factors. They actually retain the water, so that the riparian areas people grow vegetables. For example, they have a very strong root system that also hold the limitation of the sedimentation at the area. And then we also experimented some of the innovations. For example, there are very steep slope where plantation is actually very much uncertain, where actually we experimented through the coir mat, which stabilize the soil, and then we actually grow the bamboo along with other species. So that is the way actually we experimented, and that patch actually stabilized over the period of 3-4 years. And similarly, there are greater integration in the planning and policies. So we do actually engage with the district administration, the district collector, the CEO, Jilla Panchayat, and many other departments to see where are the linkages and the drifts between the policies and how the policies can be localized. In the planning processes we actually engage with them, and then it is beyond plantation. Restoration is beyond plantation. We looked upon the other requirement, integration of food or the grasslands and the agriculture, the low chemical or the no chemical agriculture practices, and ANR in the landscape where the forest is there. So then we actually again regenerated through the ANR practices, and also the culture alignment. The integration of culture is too much important in that place, because the belief system of the community has to be intact. That is the way actually we respect their cultures and engage the community through culture to generate sustainability in that program. So as I said earlier, the community engagement is there. That actually revive their cultural relationships slowly. People, because in the capacity building we engage the schools, the panchayats, the women through awareness building and training capacities. So that revival culture with the relationship with the river is actually started, because they are just earlier the notion was the sacred romance, but the reality is something else. So that has been changing frequently. And again, the institutional stewardship, the Harit Narmada Samitis, we have actually picked in every village, they are taking the stewardship to engage with the other local stakeholders, like Jan Abhiyan Parishad, which is the government of Madhya Pradesh department, which is actually building so many community engagements around the river Narmada, and school-based ecological programs, because what we believe that the youths are the future of the tomorrow. Unless we actually build the youth capitals for the ecological restoration, so the programs is somewhere not able to generate sustainability. So the school students are very much engaged, and they are aware about, and the final the outcome is it is going to be a culturally rooted initiative, and where the community power is actually come to the, because they are the assets, the cultural richness, their bonding, the social capitals are the assets of the whole interventions. So that actually redefining slowly the river and people relationships. So policy, so again, when the intervention is just started generating some outcomes, it has to be mainstreamed. Because the Narmada river, you know, that crossing across 4 different states. The major portion is in Madhya Pradesh, but it started from Amarkantak and actually in Gujarat. So there are 4 states. So the small patch of 25 kilometers doesn't suffice to actually ensure the sustainability. It needs to be mainstreamed. So what we do for the last 1 year, we did ground truthing in 9 districts, starting from Amarkantak to Devas, and then we conducted district level consultation, engaging, involving all the stakeholders, starting from the communities, civil society, government, and also the corporates. And similarly, the consultation at the state level, we engaged with the policy makers from various departments, and then took to the national level at Delhi. So for the last 1 year, we did the consultations and engaged to generate the idea of, one is scaling of 44 initiatives, scaling of partnership, scaling of policy, and scaling of the area, which is region. So where we actually realize the fact there are a lot of constraints around the policy that are there. And many policies actually contradict among themselves. For example, the little example of agriculture department. This is the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. The same department is promoting the distribution of chemical fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers to the community. And the same department is having a division called Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, PKVY. They are actually promoting the indigenous ecological farming practices in this state. Same division, same department, same district. So the same department, the policy is different from each other. So that is how actually we want to localize and integrate those policies and just demystify the policies into the framework where the local communities understand, they are well informed, they are adopting, they are practicing in spirit, where district administration and the local departments are actually enabling those environment. And governance challenges was there. That is why actually we institutionalize the whole ecosystem through a coalition of involvement. And then the institutional stewardship where the community institutions will take it forward. These are the pathways emerging for strengthening their rights, embedding cultural values, and also the civic ecology को कैसे scaling करना है, and also the multi-level partnership to inform and engage, and the policy reforms at the localized manner. So I'll stop here. If time permits, I have a very small video for 5 minutes. So that otherwise,
maybe we have a little discussion because
Take
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please sit here. I have a couple of thoughts that I might share a little later, but maybe we open up the. Please begin.
I have two questions. For the first presenter, he was talking about the forest land alienation, not being for public good. So what were those for? He didn't take us into. So what is the land being alienated? The forest land being alienated for? Is it for private investments? Is it for? And then my question to the second presenter is. In the governance of the commons, I was really thinking about the commons in my country, Uganda. What is the role of the state? Because I know that the Indian state is also a neoliberal state. So what is its role in this governance of Britannia? Because in my country, because of the factors that you point out, the commons have been taken over, the peasants, those who depend on it, have been expelled. Uganda has the biggest, I think, freshwater body in Africa, Lake Victoria, where fisheries communities depend. But for like the last 10 years, the army has taken over. The peasants, those who depend on the water body, water commons, are criminalized, and the army has taken over, and all the fish, the resources from the water is all produced for export. And that tells you the role of the state in the governance of these commons. The grazing areas have been turned into, because the grazing areas at the border with Kenya has lots of minerals, gold and other underground minerals, and so it has been turned into a mining area, and the common grazing lands are quickly being depleted, being privatized. So we are almost in a state where commons is criminalized and it's at the verge of extinction. So those of us who are working on it are really working under very strenuous conditions where I think it's almost getting impossible to do what you're doing. So really I wanted to understand what's really the role of the state in all this.
Thank you. I think I'm quite sure they have responses to it. But we'll take two more questions. You raised your hand, sir.
Yeah. So, my question is, I'm very happy that you bring all data around the land acquisition. I am roughly around 4 million hectares or something like that. But take the example of the other side, where I call it the institutionalized land grab. And the Forest Department is actually responsible through Indian Forest Act to completely institutionalize the common in the name of so-called forest land. And we were one of the lead petitioners in the Supreme Court of India in the specific case of Madhya Pradesh, where we call it the double entry land, the same land is registered in the revenue record as well as in the forest record. And just in Madhya Pradesh, just in one state, the total quantum of land, and it's the government data again, is close to 4.2 million hectares of land, which is actually grabbed by the forest department itself. So I think it's also important for us not just to talk about the land alienation, but talk about the institutionalized land grab of commons.
Correct, correct. So we take one more question and then we'll have a second round after that. Please.
My question is for Sanjeev. In terms of the stretch that you were working in, what were the kind of social dynamics, let's say, among the communities so that, questions of social status or, religion and so on, how were you able to kind of build some kind of common institution, let's say? Were there variations across that landscape, and what were the challenges associated with it?
So I didn't want to add my point, but I'll add one point of mine also in supporting your point. There is also hidden ways in which forest alienation takes place. For example, a certain part of Andamans has been opened up. What the government has done is that they have allocated forests in Aravali as an equivalent of that. So actually no deforestation has taken place, technically. But effectively, and this has happened in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh also. So there are very insidious ways by which it is adding. So I would, just adding to the point. So I would request maybe you begin responding to very important questions you have asked.
Correct. So first coming to Teresa on the governance of commons. So what is our experience in our program also across country? It's a mix of responses, particularly the commons like forest commons or wetland commons, where there are agencies emerging where the community stewardship is there, or some of the catalytic agencies are actually facilitating the governance of the commons. Most importantly, the civil societies in India playing a very important role, not to harvest the informed agencies from the state and the central side. At the same time, also the importance of the rights, entitlement, engagement, and also the co-benefits out of the commons. So that role civil societies are playing very important. And also the government side, for example, there are policies, there are leaders actually who drive in many ways. There are department actually they are playing very important role in the FRA settlement, for example, and also custodian, just transferring the India's oldest institution, that is the Gram Sabha, is the permanent body across the country. So as per the constitution, the Gram Sabha, the village assembly, which is actually the first and foremost and the stabilized permanent institutional framework in the country. So many ways, for example, in our case, those commons, the revenue land, some of the revenue land, some of the degraded forest land. So that the department, particularly the district level Jila Panchayat, so with our dialogue and interactions and also engagement with them, so they have transferred the custodian to the Gram Panchayat, where the Gram Panchayat is taking care of those commons. Then coming to the regeneration or renovations or the restoration work, the Gram Panchayat has given a written resolution to us while facilitating the restoration through plantation of activities through ANR or the active restoration work through plantation. So that is happening. Depends on the who are leading that department or agency and who is facilitating and how strengthen the community stewardship is. So I think this is my response to you, and definitely this is in India. This is not like the yesterday's, for example, the plenary, the private commons has been in the USA. So that is not the case in India, but still there is challenges across the commons.
So I will, you have to respond to that
Yeah.
also, but can we just have a little quick response from you, then we can come
Sure,
back.
sure.
Thank you very much for your questions and observations. To answer your query on whether the forest land diversion is for welfare or priority. When I looked at the data and more in a segregated manner, like the graph which I have shown, the 60% of the forest land has been diverted for the industrial projects. And there is a data also the names of the companies or the names of the private people. So from the data, I would say that it's a more of the private interests. There the state has been diverted the forest land, especially in the name of the industrial development. So it's more of a private interest in nature. But when we collect the same thing with the employment given in those industries for the local people, and we don't have the data. See, the same data set, there is something has been not made public, or it is confidential. I don't know. But the thing is that when some data is missing in the same data set, the same industry people can give the data how many for how many people the employment was given, but that is not coming in up. So from that I would say that it's more of a private interest, where the state is acting as a facilitator rather than regulator.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, thanks to you actually, the community characters and the social arrangement, particularly at the riparian areas. So when we actually divide the Narmada river in Madhya Pradesh, we find 5 different characteristics of the river. From Amarkantak to Dindori and Mandla, there is one kind of characteristics of the river landscape. From Mandla to Jabalpur is another kind of, and the Jabalpur to Narsinghpur, where the midstream actually happens where we actually live. So that is a different kind of characteristics and the terrain. And so also the community. So particularly the river where actually crosses where we have actually worked. So this is the forest commons. Mostly the forest dependent tribal communities, the Gond and Vayas, they are the major dominated community. And also the farming communities are there. The other backward classes, the farming community are there because they are depending upon the forest, the agriculture across the riparian area. And the forest dependent communities, the Gond and Vayas. So either they are depending upon the forest or the non-timber forest produce. Slowly that has been also transforming towards the non-NTFE based livelihoods. And they are marginalized, very small land holdings, landless are there. In some patches, people are also migrating to outside in search of the seasonal works. So this kind of actually the community distribution is there.
Maybe we have time for 2 quick observations or thoughts, then we will have to stop. If anybody has any thoughts, further thoughts they wanted to share. Yeah, please, Dimple. Yeah.
That you shared that you started the discussions with riparian. So I was just thinking that is it really in presence, like riparian commons? We discuss it. Otherwise, what is that? If we see it as a, yes, there is a river system, another like example, but it is mostly as a commons. If we also look at like it's a landscape, but on ground physically we see it as different parcels of land. Can it be common land, private land, and those things? So riparian commons around that, is there anything, some policy, some discussion in there?
Yes. One second, one more and then you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about when you mentioned, especially I think Sanjeev sir, when you mentioned about community and deep and community engagement, what exactly do you mean by that, and how did you kind of incorporate that in your study or in your project? Also on community resilience, if you can talk a little bit about what exactly were the activities or, what do you mean by that and how
Yes.
you address that?
So we have about 2 minutes, so we cannot answer those questions in great depth, I know.
Yeah, that's okay.
But maybe,
But we'll engage,
please,
definitely.
But definitely a quick response from both of you would be
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Okay. First, we are trying to push in to influence the state agencies and departments. So why don't we have a authority of riparian restoration, riparian zone, like the wetland authority that happens to be exist. So, and in terms of the characteristics, we actually evolved with the riparian zones into R1, R2, R3 and R4 based on their characteristics and slopes and these hubs and shrubs, forest, agricultural land. So we have divided and just that is the characteristics we actually evolved with the researchers and the experiences. So that exists, but not physical existence is there. That has to be restored through some kind of institutionalization of the game. So we'll discuss more. And coming to Deepika, so basically, when I say the community engagement or how actually it's a in any interventions, community-led initiative, this is the most important and challenging task for any agency. Unless we mobilize the community and building the trust and engage them, any program is just a transactional things. It is not transformative. Unless we build the ownership, people, because it needs a lot of behavioral change communication, their mindset change is required, and that is how actually we work around. We are just wearing their shoes and also our shoes. That is the balancing act, because, for example, we think we know everything, but we don't know many things which the community knows. So this comes from their wisdom, and it takes some time. एक साल लग सकता है, 2 साल भी लग सकता है to mobilize, and once the community realize the fact this is important for us, this is going to support us, their mutual benefits, it's a win-win situation, they will engage with. I will discuss.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think I have the right to take 30 seconds to sum up. I think in civil society in India, one of the things that we are increasingly aware of is how mature, articulate, and to some extent confident civil society is in India. And we are dealing with the problem of scale. On the one hand, we realize the granulated nature of adaptation at the community level and how important that granularity is in ensuring sustainability. But the extent to which environmental damage proceeds is on a very large scale. So we need to find mechanisms of engaging with scale, which is why the need to engage with the state, which is why the need to engage with the problems at landscape level. So, my dear colleagues, it has been wonderful having you. We had a luxurious time of having in-depth presentations and good discussions.
So,
Thank you.
I would say, if time permits, before we just leave this room, I have a fantastic video clip actually that will answer many of your questions.
So there are,
it's a very small.
it is 15 now, and there is another session after this. So I think we need to forgive me. You will have
Take
to
it.
forgive me. Huh? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Please upload. Yeah. On the website.
Upload that video on the website.
Take. Thank you. Thank you so much. No issues.